All right, excellent. So let's indeed have a money talk. Yeah, very important in the ecosystem, I would say. So for us, very pleased to have three very esteemed individuals on my left. So I'm 100% sure this will be informative. We have half an hour, so I really want to dive in very quickly. So let me start by just having yourself introduce yourself. So Dirk, perhaps can you kick off? Just say a bit kind of what is your investment mandate broadly, and what have you done, especially in Fintech, InsurTech, and perhaps what is what are you excited about, just to kind of kick it off.
Okay. Hi, Dirk from Quaquebeke. Started a fund here together with two partners, $80 million fund. We invest in India, Southeast Asia, Japan, and US. US and Japan predominantly very, very early stuff. India and Southeast Asia also up to B rounds. By background, we're all entrepreneurs, so we're three partners. The most successful of us, Teru, has IPO'd 2 companies in Japan. Myself, I've done 6, sold 2, failed 2, and 2 I'm a large dividend shareholder in. We come in usually pretty early, so seed, A round, and if you look at sort of the patterns over the last 5-6 years as individual investors and then as a group together, we have done a lot of marketplaces, like a lot. Tokopedia as an example here in the region, Sendo as an example, so these are really horizontal plays, and now there's verticalization of the same. So when we look at insurances or we look at financial products, a lot of them are actually folding into these marketplaces where the transaction happens. So simple example, if you're an eBay Motors, an auto loan product or an insurance product might fall full stack into the transaction. Amazon is now dabbling around with it. That's something that excites us because of our portfolio. Then we have done a lot of set of infrastructure investments, PSP level, so like a payment service provider, and there's a lot of fintech happening around there as well, whether it's shopping cart financing, leveraging the data for alternative scoring, and underwriting various products. For the region per se, I think the most interesting pockets of insurance are actually B2B for various, like a waterfall of reasons, and there are certain pockets that I'm excited about. And less B2C for, again, a waterfall of reasons. I'm excluding Singapore here in this equation. A lot of it has to do with education. Education on, let's take it to the macro, investing overall. If consumers think about investing in the majority of the countries, it's literally, okay, lending, can I get money somewhere? Second is maybe investing, and robo-advising might be sort of a mass play to increase adoption on that side, and then maybe insurance. So I think that's in a brief. I don't want to take too much of the time, and I'm happy to go into anything in detail.
Yeah, thank you. Dusan?
Yeah, hi, my name is Dusan. I did my entrepreneurial exit in 2004 from an internet bank. I guess we can call it e-finance, somebody call it what we did during the dot-com boom. So we survived and had about 350,000 customers, 350 people, and 12 million euros of profit. Mona Bank in France sold that in 2004 as part of CIC. And ever since, basically, I've specialized in B2B fintech, where I include InsurTech. So I've done 18 investments. 9 of those have been exited, 5 fully, 4 partly. And there is one that might die, unfortunately. I spend a lot of time on the companies that I've invested into. My investment partners and myself, we are 40. We are in Beijing, Hong Kong, Singapore, Iberia, New York, Paris, Berlin, Stockholm, London. And it's got to be a B2B play for us to invest. In terms of insurance, what do we invest into? We do not invest in marketplaces. However, I think there is loads of opportunities in Asia to do marketplaces and make big money there. So don't take that as something that just because I don't invest in that, that's bad. So I think that that's huge opportunities where we've seen proven business models in Europe and Asia that are just Europe and US, and just evolving here in Asia, and I think these are really great opportunities. What I do invest into in terms of insurance are 3 areas. Number one, on the connected IoT that I'm interested in, on the P2P insurance I'm interested in, and in blockchain I'm interested in. And the reason why I'm interested in these 3 areas is that it fundamentally changes the value chain of how things have been done before. So that is what I like to dive into. And sometimes these three areas actually connect between them, and then it becomes very, very interesting. So that's basically what I do.
My name is Slava. I'm managing partner of Life.SREDA, Fintech fund. I launched this fund 4 years ago. We invested in 20 companies for today, already successfully exited from 7. And regarding InsurTech, we are covering this area for last 2 years through our Money of the Future report. In terms of investments, we didn't invest it before into InsurTech. We want to, but still without right partners inside our team. We always believe in people more than in money. And regarding, for example, like in blockchain, we launched our practice with blockchain only when 3 guys in London came to our team. And the same with InsurTech. We know a lot, but still it's very few thoughts in comparison with some real specialists on the market, and hope soon we will announce some activities in this area.
Excellent. So thanks for all the introductions. I think quite diverse in where you came from, what you're doing, obviously. I think what's fascinating for us as if I look at it from an ecosystem perspective, and the last 2-3 years, we've seen a lot more kind of concerted efforts from the investment community to really be more dedicated on fintech, to build up domain expertise, not only from the VC side and perhaps here and there on the angel side, but also, of course, from strategic investors. But a lot of the strategic investors, you can read banks. A lot of the banks, of course, also realize that they don't have the skill set to be VC, to work with, to have the domain expertise, to know how to work on entrepreneurship. So you see some of them now teaming up with you guys. So if you look at that whole kind of dynamics that we've all seen in this whole landscape maturing over the last 2-3 years, what's your current state of play, or your current state of play globally around fintech investments? What are the different constituencies that you see, and how do you see them kind of co-investing? Perhaps Slava, if you can start, and then Dusan, you're next.
Seems like insurance companies more active than banks 4 years ago. I mean, insurance companies in InsurTech than banks in fintech 4 years ago. Still, for example, in fintech, only 26% of investment belongs to banks. I do not remember clearly about participation of insurance companies, but in terms of their activities, to know more, to facilitate some negotiations with new talents, they are more active than banks. Several markets already closed for to change your mindset. Like, for example, in China, such companies like Pesin, they're already very big. They're extremely tech advanced. Even their daughter company, which provide an app to order to make an appointment with your doctor, $3.5 billion valuated. This good startup, little bit bigger than some banks in some countries and or insurance companies, and they're growing so fast. Really, you can make an appointment through chat or through something else. In several countries, like countries across Southeast Asia, it's a little bit early to talk about real deals and exits. The same with FinTech Total. It mostly talks about sandboxes, awards, articles, etc. And regarding future steps in terms of 2-3 years, we can talk about that. I think that my own opinion that insurance companies, the smartest way will be the same like BBVA provided in fintech area. They do not try to teach new startups. They do not try to import their teams, their products inside their current traditional business. They try to educate themselves via investing and buy out of these new players. And like Steve Jobs did when he came second time to Apple, he split it, Apple, for 2 companies, and made Johnny Ive, current chief of product of Apple, head of new company in parallel. Not like we will took some innovative guys and we'll place them between 20-30,000 old school guys, and they will die for sure between them. But he provided opportunity even to sit in different business building with different titles, and I think it will be smartest way to fintech insurance companies to explore InsurTech area.
Dusan, for you, if you would kind of give a snippet of how you see the fintech investment community maturing globally, well, what's your take on it?
I guess we're focusing on the InsurTech piece here, right? So I think the most exciting, I think, I will look at it in terms of cities, geographies, but also in terms of corporates. So I think Slava kind of nailed it, that there are a couple of insurance companies that are very, very fast moving. And he mentioned Ping An. I think we've heard earlier that AXA is very aggressive and very good. I think we should acknowledge MetLife, Manulife as well, AIA and Aviva. And I think what you're seeing are some of these insurance companies, they are actually more aggressive than the banks. So I would say, if you look at AXA, who is actually originally French, I mean, they are kicking ass compared to the French banks. They're not doing anything compared to AXA, what they are doing in insurance. So I think if you are an entrepreneur, you've got to have a feeling for who are the first movers, right? We're kind of naming some of these guys for you, because we have a global view on them from our 9 cities. So you have the first movers, you have the followers, and you have these guys who are never going to move and who are going to die. So you're going to have to team up with those that are actually fast movers if you need them as clients. And you need to kind of not get discouraged to get a lot of no's, because you're probably getting no's from a lot of the guys who are going to die. Now, if you look at it in terms of which cities or geographies are the most exciting, I think Shanghai is extremely interesting, could be Beijing as well, but mainland China is obviously extremely interesting. We were talking a little bit earlier about, the gray zone between, what is my personal profile and my professional profile, and what can be shared and not shared. And, I'm from Europe, and we are kind of protectionist in terms of what can be said and told about us and how our data is going to be used, similar to the US. Less so maybe in some areas of Asia. For me, what is going on WeChat is just fascinating. The professional and private life is getting one together. People say maybe it shouldn't, but that's a fact that it does happen. So from that point of view, WeChat and mainland China and Shanghai is, for me, by far number 1 in terms of where it's really, really innovative. Second to that, I still think, that San Francisco is what it is and the Bay Area is what it is. It will always get a couple of extremely disruptive ideas there, but that they can't test it on as many potential B2B customers, because you know what? There are no B2B, there are no insurance companies in the Valley. So who are you going to go and actually disrupt, and who are you going to get as a customer? It's a little bit hard. So I don't think Silicon Valley has the traditional advantage in terms of InsurTech that it had. London, I would still say it's fantastic. So after Shanghai, I would say London is just nuts in terms of how would they see innovation, how they're going to move Lloyd's from whatever it was to a completely new play. So I think that is actually very fascinating. So I would say Shanghai and London would be the 2 cities that I would cover.
Dirk, what's your observations?
Yeah, very, very little to add. I think, like to my previous point, it's the last frontier sort of in the holistic investment approach. So lending has been done, was one of the first ones, then investing was sort of the second, and now InsurTech is where like a lot of the action is at. Talent-wise and activity-wise in Southeast Asia, it's a bit not so exciting yet, I think. I agree with London being more a hotbed. I cannot speak of China. I think also the insurance companies aforementioned are good examples of them. They have woken up, and they had a bit of a warning signal from the banks, I guess. So that's where the wave hit first, and they took that as a warning and acted, and they do that on various levels, right? And also from an entrepreneurial point, I would actually take note of that and look at it. Example. If you want to build a full stack insurance play and rebuild an insurance from scratch, well, look around the world. There are a few companies or few funds that have actually very innovative, almost collaborations with their LPs, and these LPs are large insurance companies, right? So you have very good examples in the Silicon Valley. Some of them are here, and find them and team up if you're going. So do your research on your investors, I think, like if you're looking for capital.
Good, good. So if we flip the conversation around a bit, kind of from an investor perspective, how you look at the ecosystem, and I wish we could have much more time to talk about it, but if you flip it out and go back into your own community, if you look at the VC metrics or data points that you are encouraged by globally, if it's either on the valuations or on the exits, the micro M&A or trade sales that we see happening, new forms of funding or investment vehicles coming in. Perhaps, what are the key numbers that you or data points that you want to share and say that is for us very encouraging from the VC perspective? What metrics would you what do you see?
Well, I'm a little bit earlier, I guess, than the other guys in terms of investing, so I'll start with the one that is actually maybe more early stage. So I'm obviously only focused on talent, given that I'm extremely early. So what I see is very important for an ecosystem is actually what Singapore is doing the last. I've been here 2.5 years. How long have you been similar here, right? 1 year, okay, a little bit. I mean, it's just amazing what has happened here in 2.5 years. You know, GFDI was the only accelerator. I think there are, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 15 now. It's just the whole ecosystem play in terms of actually having talent, but also bringing in talent from across the world. That is, for me, the key point. That the more talent is there, you know, the more likely it is to find that right entrepreneur. Now, I'm very particular, so I only invest in people that have actually done it before, who have started a company before. So, but that's part of my investment thesis. But for me, it's that talent. And if this city or country can continue to bring in talent, that it is going to be one of the most competitive parts of the world. It's not going to happen over day, but I am, and this is why I'm saying when I moved over here 2.5 years ago, I said 5 years. Now I'm saying another 5 years at least.
Dirk, what about you? If you say something around multiples from a VC, what multiples are you looking for? What kind of deals have you seen exiting, IPOing?
I mean, I think we're fairly early as well. That's number one. So entrepreneur is usually like the best sort of radar on it. And then I like, and a lot of these like fintech plays, you know, I want to see some sort of a Trojan horse to achieve something better and greater. So really think deep about your strategy and about sort of like I love serial entrepreneurs. I love people that think in defensibility and network effects, etc. I mean, these are all multi-layered sort of points. In terms of multiples, it feels more like an art than a science at the early stage, you know? I mean, yes, you have sort of big cycles, and we had a correction, and that goes in waves, like the cycle corrects in the valley first, and then kind of comes through India, and then kind of finds its way to Southeast Asia, and China. It's a blind spot, so I cannot talk about it, but I think it's a more cyclical thing, and it's unfair to the entrepreneur and the company to value them on a multiple when there are no revenues or barely any revenues, right? So obviously you have your revenue and profit multiples where you have to think to at the end game and kind of work your way backwards, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's also, and what I'm trying to drive through is a bit of also, if you just look at the numbers of say last year, if you look at CB Insights, for example, people said it was about $25 billion invested in fintech at large. Slava, you mentioned yesterday on the InsurTech, give or take $3 billion now. If you look at the size of the InsurTech of the insurance markets vis-a-vis the banks, it's actually much bigger. So the opportunity in InsurTech might be actually much larger in that respect. But if you say, and of course you, especially with Life.SREDA, done a lot of research, and therefore your yearly publications are absolutely fantastic. Can you share us a couple of those other points, just numbers around, give people a bit of context of size and so forth?
If we will check different metrics regarding valuations of these companies, not so many companies right now mentioned in between investors ecosystem like overvaluated. Why? Because maybe at first it's not so hot area. I mean, not so many participants came to the market, and valuation growing not so fast as somebody wants to. Second one, in terms of stage of growth, when you already launched your product, when you tested your MVP, after that scaling to second, third market, at this stage of growth, most of metrics belongs to how fast and how cheap you can attract your customers. Right now, how attention, for example, like with Lemonade or French insurance in Europe, the same like Lemonade, but in Europe, how attention belongs to your scaling, or complementary services from health tech area like Dog Planner. They cover right now about 25 markets with 9 million customers, and most of them still unprofitable. But it's okay for today's stage of growth. Second one, everybody trying to understand how what's about vision of founders of these companies, how they will convert or will go to complementary verticals. Because if we will talk about InsurTech, slogan of this vertical can be more than insurance. If you want to sell only insurance products, nobody will be interested in you. You have to show for your investors how you will go to personal financial management services, online trading services, even to wish lists. And wish lists, they are very well connected with e-commerce. Or how do you want to go to health tech, IoT, and how this and this ability to go to complementary verticals belongs to how carefully you can store and analyze data about your customers. You can be unprofitable for today, for next 2 years, but you have to show today how much data do you have, how you can storage it, predict some steps in terms of behavior of your customers to the future, how you will educate them finally.
Okay, no, very helpful. I just want to switch gears quickly. I think one of the most important thing, and also very much underestimated if I look at it from an entrepreneurial perspective, is that the relationship between an entrepreneur and investor is super important. It's not just about the money. It's really, it's like a marriage, and it's very much a cliche, but it's so true. Obviously, if that relationship needs to be very strong, it's around finding that smart money, and also therefore from an investor, you need to demonstrate a certain domain expertise. You need to have some value creation that you can add to the check that you provide them. So that's partly what the strong entrepreneurs are able to select with whom they make a deal. It's also how investors or VCs needs to kind of make themselves stand apart. So how do you look with, especially Fintech, InsurTech, a lot of domain expertise that you need to bring to bear, or what's the value creation that you, and the type of relationship that you have with your portfolio companies? Dusan, perhaps if you can...
Yeah, so we have done this for 10 years, so we've actually established a KPI. So we have one main KPI, which is the commercialization on B2B fintech. So basically our KPI, or our USP to you, is that we have roughly about 1,000 relationships with financial institutions across the 9 cities. And based on the data that we have, we know that we can convert between 5 and 10% if you have a really awesome product. At least historically, that's what we managed to do. So that would mean that we should be able to give you between 50 and 100 customers in a period of 3 years' time. So that's how long we would engage actually with the company to help it scale up. So that's roughly our unique selling proposition. And we track that KPI monthly with the entrepreneurs in terms of how it goes. And then basically the entrepreneurs tell us, if those introductions were good and which ones were really bad. So we stop the bad ones and continue with the good ones. Obviously, it's on a case by case. In some cases, we've converted 10, in some cases 5%, but that's roughly what we've done during the last 10 years. So that's the number one KPI we have. And the second KPI we have is actually how much you can actually manage to get new money in after we've been around. So we would invest in the very beginning, but we would also invest a little bit later. And at that stage, that's the second KPI saying similar, like how many of those financial institutions who would invest in you, that is VC, corporate VCs, family offices, how many of those could invest into you. So that's the other KPI we have. And then obviously the ratio is even worse. So it's not 5 to 10%. Then we're talking about 1 to 5%, because it's very, very hard to get money later on. But it's another KPI that we measure. And again, we go not every month, but every month when you do fundraising and look at how that goes. So these are the two KPIs we set up for ourselves to make sure that we can deliver value back to you. So it's new customers basically on B2B and new money into your ventures.
Dirk, how about you? On the value creation type of relationship, how do you help entrepreneurs along?
Sure. So we if you look at sort of the partnership that I'm a part of, it's very international. So we have one partner is very deeply entrenched in Japan, myself in Europe, and here Southeast Asia, India. We are all based here, and the third one in the US. So introductions up downstream capital help very interesting business angels to participate. So really choosing sort of this wedding ceremony and inviting the right guests to the party, I think is very, very important and actually a crucial step. Then also along the capital chain, one of the biggest problems we have actually, it starts earlier. So like the value add starts earlier, consulting on helping them picking the right investors, but also the biggest problem we as VCs have here in the region is really toxic cap tables. So like one is founders, but the other thing is like when we invest, we want to build a really large company with the founders we back. And toxic cap tables means, like an angel having invested 100,000 wants a 25% of the company, right? And already that's going to be a large issue later on. So there are a lot of these small issues and handholdings that we do a lot earlier through office hours and other things. And then when it comes to upstream follow-on funding and or exit, so we helped one of our companies recently to exit to PayU, and not like the initial introductions came from us. We were involved in the process, etc. That was 135 million exit in India. So also all the way to exit or follow-on capital.
So you really help them in the whole negotiation, the valuation, price discovery, or?
No, not that deep, but like the selection of like, okay, who should we talk to? Who can we intro? Who can we help with? On the sales development side, we haven't measured it. We should actually. It's a nice KPI, I like the analogy. But yeah, it's a lot about biz dev plus VC follow-on rounds and potential exit. And then a lot of strategic discussions. But there, usually I would like to back an entrepreneur who has a very clear vision of what they want to do, and obviously happy to spare any time.
Slava, I know you very well, so I know you're hands-on too. So give the audience a flavor.
I think that our main value is to help founders of these companies to estimate, to imagine the vision of their company better or wider than they expected before. Because in comparison with some investors which are trying to push every time their portfolio companies to launch their product as fast as they can, to become profitable as fast as they can, etc., etc. We are trying to give them some time and resources to think, to be calm, but to see how they can create bigger value for customers. Because our play, game of VC guys, not about how to create some guaranteed money for today, but how to create value for customers today. And after that, this attention, this loyalty will return to you, but in long-term perspective. If you will not think in terms of long-term game, I think it can damage mindset and plans of your portfolio kids.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, so I don't I cannot open up for the audience, but probably in the end with investors, probably best to have one-on-ones with them anyway. You might not want to share that with the whole audience, or at least that's my disclaimer for this. But really great to have at least a quick snapshot around VC. Personally, again, for me, if I look at it from an eco perspective, I always say we need more entrepreneurs, but it also we need more VCs. Yeah, the capital is so important to drive ecosystem forward, especially in something which is very diverse and complicated as Fintech, InsurTech. I've seen now about 20 fairly active VCs in Southeast Asia. We see a few more coming from Europe and the US to fuel this ecosystem from a top-down approach. And we hope, of course, that with you all contributing, that we see much more activity. Yeah. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I hope it was informative. And I think we're moving on. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much.